総裁選を通じて選ばれた新たなリーダーを一兵卒として支えていくことに徹してまいります。
Faced with record low approval ratings, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida announced his decision not to run again. Kishida will leave his post in September without keeping his pledge to tackle the biggest problem facing the country, the economy. Will Japan's new leader fix its economy? In early 2024, Japan slipped into recession, losing its spot as the world's third largest economy. Consumer confidence remains low and salaries are not growing. But it was not always so grim. Japan's economy was once a success story. The so-called Japanese economic miracle describes the country's lightning-fast growth starting in the 1950s, thanks to technology, cheap and abundant labor, and industrial conglomerates. In just a span of 30 years from the end of World War II, the island nation built itself from the ground up to become the second largest free market economy. Japanese products flooded global markets and the country prospered, until an economic crash in the 1990s. Since then, GDP growth has fallen flat, prices have remained stagnant, and consumer spending has dropped. The post-economic miracle period has now been dubbed the lost decades.
That Japan has had structural problems with its economy related to, of course, a declining population, more and more older people and fewer younger people. We've had stagnant wages and something called deflation. Deflation, basically, the cost of things continue to decline over time. We have gender inequality, and we have productivity problems. We still have problems with lifetime employment and the lack of vertical and horizontal mobility. So basically, it doesn't matter how hard you work, really, in Japan, your pay is going to be about the same as the person that doesn't work so hard.
In 2012, former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and his Liberal Democratic Party won the general election and introduced an ambitious set of measures to restabilize the Japanese economy. The plan was nicknamed Abenomics.
But a better way, I think, to understand it is a little bit like economic acupuncture. So needles all over the Japanese economy to try and get it stimulated in ways that are sustainable.
Abenomics was based on three axes, commonly known as the three arrows. First, economic stimulation by investing in public infrastructure projects. Second, monetary reform by trying to weaken its currency to boost exports and pushing banks to lend with negative interest rates. And finally, structural reform by reforming corporate governance and lifetime employment and recruiting women into the workforce.
There's some wins and losses and underperformers, but I think in general, Prime Minister Abe's economic policies domestically did improve corporate governance. We saw deeper investment with the United States, which benefits the Japanese economy. We saw more women participation in the Japanese economy, so that's a good thing. We generally saw a slight edging of wages upward over his period in office.
But overall, inflation hardly rose above the expected 2%, and Japan's GDP shrank even more between 2012 and 2020, when Abe left office.
On the downside, lots more could have been done. I think that there's still need for more vertical mobility based on performance, or horizontal mobility. That means being able to job hop. Job hopping in Japan is very, very unusual. And again, breaking some of the traditional post-World War II models of economic development, which really focused on lifetime employment and seniority-based pay rather than performance-based pay. And until that equation changes, a lot of the issues in Japan, whether it's buying a house or where you get married or where you live, will continue to be downward pressure on the Japanese economy.
Abe's successor, Yoshihide Suga, became prime minister in 2020, largely on the promise of continuing Abe's policies. But Suga only led the country for a little over a year. He stepped down in 2021 after facing criticism over his handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. Kishida was then entrusted by the LDP to become Japan's next leader. This time, he had a different plan, called New Capitalism.
アベノミクスの成長の果実をどう分配するのか、コロナによってより深刻した格差にどう向き合うのか、新しい資本主義というものをどのようにリードしていくのか、このあたりをしっかりと訴えていきたいと思います。
I don't think anybody can give you a clear definition of what new capitalism is. But I think what many of us understand new capitalism is to be an economy that works for the average citizen, where we see gradual pay increases, we see an economy that allows people to have families, have that first and second kid, an economy that distributes the profits from big businesses to ordinary citizens.
But just as the world was recovering from the economic fallout of the pandemic, the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine hindered Kishida's plans for the country. Fuel prices skyrocketed and inflation rose globally. So what's ahead?
We're going to see, in terms of the Japanese economy moving forward, is wages are going to increase. We're likely to see the Japanese yen strengthen further as the U.S. Changes its interest rate policies. Japan, as it tries to deal with the many security challenges in its backyard, is going to invest more and more in joint technological development with the United States and other like-minded countries, and this will be a boom to its economy.
Moreover, Negi said Japan's population will continue to decline, forcing a redistribution of wealth. In some projections, the country's super-aging population is expected to plummet from 124 million in 2023 to 100 million in 2050.
Most estimates, we're going to see increased productivity, GDP continue to increase, meaning that there'll be more capital production per citizen, which means a better quality of life for individual Japanese.
Kishida may be leaving office without much improvement to the economy, but there may be a light at the end of the tunnel for whoever leads the country next.